Welcome to the Scrutiny Board meeting for September of the authority. We've got a number of guests who will be coming in as time permits. So if we start with the formal part of the agenda, apologies for absence.
Yes, we've had 2 apologies for absence from Councillor Richard Foster and Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you. Any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests? None were declared. If anybody thinks of something when it occurs, that's fine. Are there any exclusions of the press and public? None? None? Right, in terms of my opening comments, I mean, it's been a busy few weeks. There's a number of issues that have come up. I've attended every single, all bar one WICA meeting, not to combine that, so the transport meeting, the business meetings, the climate change meetings. I've attended them all so I can see for myself how they're operating, and some are operating well, others I think need to be tweaked a bit in terms of the most enthusiastic meeting I attended was the business meeting, where the business leaders in West Yorkshire are very enthusiastic about getting the economy going here, so that was welcome. I've had some particularly interesting briefings. There was one on the Bradford interchange, there's one on Mayor's Fares because of the potential financial impact that's going to happen. We've also had briefings on the finance, performance information, hence the reason you've got that today, the assurance framework. I've also met with Debbie Simpson from the Governance and Audit Committee to try and make sure there isn't duplication of the work that we are doing and the work that they are doing, because otherwise that would be a waste of resource. And I've had a good briefing on the local growth plan as well, and Felix is here today to expand upon that, because that's something that is tied in to the government's industrial strategy and also tied into the final decisions that were made at the budget at the end of October, and so Felix will fill us all in on that. And I've also got a partial update on the Gateway review. Those of you who were on the Corporate Scrutiny Board last year will remember that we were promised the outcomes of the review. Well, they will hopefully be with us end of October, beginning of November. Now what that's about is how has the Mayor spent her gain share money? Has it met with the obligations and the rules and regulations that have been set out, and whether or not it can continue at the current level, or whether or not, if it was combined into a single pot, some of the constraints that would then be put on it. So that's basically all I've got to say in terms of opening comments. Right, so if we now move on to item 5, which is the scrutiny and governance arrangements. As far as that's concerned, we need to approve the vice chairs being councillors Richard Smith and Matt Edwards. So are we happy to approve that? Yep. And in terms of the other governance arrangements, now there are some points that have been raised. So Councillor Barnes, do you want to just briefly outline the issues that you raised?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's in relation to the call-in process, and it's actually more to do with the process of the call-in rather than this. So it's based at the moment. It would be very difficult for individual members, I believe, to comply with that without some form of process procedure. How do we contact all the members? For instance, how is that undertaken? And it'd be very difficult to do within 5 days, and therefore I think there is serious danger of the calling process being missed on that basis. I think we need to make sure that there is a proper structured process, help and assistance in doing that from either from scrutiny officers or from WICA themselves. Okay.
Thank you, thank you. And Councillor Rhodes also had some issues that we were going to raise as well.
Indeed, Chairman. It's in terms of the length of time once a recommendation or an advisory note. The length of time in terms of any recommendation or advisory to WICA. At the moment, I understand it's 2 months. In some areas up and down the country, and indeed local authorities, it's a wider anything between 3 and 6 months. Bearing in mind the different aspects now coming from different subgroups that we set up, there could be more than one recommendation going through from those subgroups. And I wonder if the committee should actually consider extending that to at least 3 months to accommodate the issues that other members will bring through the subgroups.
That's fine. Callum will take that back to the relevant people to discuss issues. And the other one that was made, Councillor Merritt, you wanted to make a comment.
Yes, it was about the gender balance of the committee and also equalities representation. We are obviously where we are. It's quite difficult meeting all the rules, but nonetheless, I think it would be helpful if we did make a request to appointing authorities to try and bear that in mind in future.
That's fine, thank you. Right, anybody got any other questions or queries on that? If not, can we approve that? Yep, so we can now move on to item 6, which is the Scrutiny Annual Report. Those of you who were on scrutiny last year, you may recognise. You may recognise some of the activities that have been outlined there. So can we approve the scrutiny report? Councillor Jenkins, yep, that's fine.
Yeah, can I just, on page 10 of the report, it talks about the Flexibus pilot. And in the final paragraph, it says there were many lessons learned and an evaluation report was due to be completed in the near future. I just wondered if we could tie that down a bit and actually find out what the lessons learned were and actually give a date for that report, because it could be part of bus franchising in the future.
Yeah, I know that it was one of the better scrutinies that actually took place on the Transport Committee last year. From what I can understand, those that were on the Transport really enjoyed that one because they got right into the guts of the decision as to why it occurred. Do you want to add anything, Callum? No.
Just to say that it's on the work programme. It's in the current work programme for the next item for that to come back in future.
Okay, that's fine. So are we happy to approve the report? Yeah.
Sorry, it's a supplementary on the previous. The other issue was about the governance aspects, which were referred to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee to consider. Was that done before the end of last year, or is that outstanding?
It was in the scrutiny protocol review.
It's in the scrutiny protocol review, and we're currently working through that to make sure that that is fully implemented. We're working with senior officers to make sure that that is all fed in. Okay, right. So if we've approved that one, we now move on to the next item, which is item 7, which is the Scrutiny Work Programme. You should see set out there is the first cut of the Scrutiny Work Programme, and you should also find a copy of the key or major decisions that are going to be made by the authority as well. It's just a first cut. It's a dynamic document, so it will change depending on circumstances. We obviously, in the pre-meeting, we were discussing the Bradford interchange. That will go up or down the schedule of work depending on the outcomes of the discussions that take place both at the Combined Authority and at the Transport Committee. And you've also heard of the number of briefings that we've had with senior officers on a number of issues, and some of those may come forward. And certainly after the October budget nationally, I think finance will be coming to sharper focus, both good, hopefully if we're getting extra money, as to how it's going to be spent, or if some of the anticipated money doesn't come through, or things are changed in terms of priorities, we need to meet. And we will definitely be having a working group on the budget, because it is vitally important that the budget comes through. So, Edward, we got any questions on the work programme? Yes, Councillor Haig.
Yes, Chair. Just is there an indication on here as to when we're going to be bringing these items? I just think that's helpful in terms of understanding what we're going to be doing.
Do you want to go?
Sorry. Oh. What we'll do is, once you approve these topics and you're happy with them, once we approve these topics and you're happy with them, Kate and I will liaise with internal colleagues to sort of draw up a best timeline for the key, where the decision points or progress points to report back to you, so you can decide which meetings they go to or how to otherwise maintain an overview of them or bring them forward or whatever.
Yeah, so if we can see roughly when they're going to, what meeting we're planning to do them at, and also when those key decisions are being taken, so that if we want to look at something before the decision's taken,
Yes.
that would be the most appropriate time to do
It's
it.
a matter of marrying up all the different documents and also looking at the work programmes of the various committees to make sure that we are not duplicating anything that they're doing, so that we can add value to the exercise as we go through. So yeah, that's all got to be done, but they've not set their agendas either, their work programmes either. So you indicated, Councillor Carter.
Yes, Chair, thank you. It's just there's a significant amount of stuff on this work programme that is not going to get completed in this current year, I would have thought. Are we going to set priorities?
Well, we can set priorities for the ones that will probably be done in public, but there will be a number of bits of work being done behind the scenes by people who are going to take on specific responsibilities. So they will get individual briefings from the relevant officers, and they will then feed back to us whether or not they feel that there is a need for further investigation, or whether or not their reports that they've got are sufficient. So we're relying on, and that's why again you've heard from some members in the pre-meeting as to the work that they've been doing, and you can see how we're trying to work as collegiately as we possibly can to try and bring things forward. The people who have been given those roles, officers, have been advised that these people are in position now so that they can give them due regard when if they request a private briefing, then they will get one, and that's been adhered to without any questions or raised. So they will then come back to us, and we will then change the priorities based on the briefings that we get.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Anybody get it? Yes, Councillor Rhodes.
Chair, thank you. Geraldine started off my comments. Well done. In terms of the issues that have been brought here, for, as Geraldine is saying, a plethora of schemes, including the mayor's priorities. Why aren't we asking for the appropriate officers of all these schemes, not for us to prioritise? That's down, I believe, to the authority of ICA and the appropriate officers who put these schemes forward, for them to prioritise, so that we know that the issues that are forefront can be dealt with and taken out of the list here that will never be done by meetings that we attend. So I believe that the officers should prioritise and notify the Scrutiny Committee through yourself what their priorities are. Secondly, in terms of the format of the forward plan, I'd like to see the forward plan. I've been asking for this for quite some years. There is, I believe, a column missing, and that column should be set decision for the due date. I think we need a column in there if it's delayed, a reason why.
Yep.
We ask these in all our sector programmes, and in that column it should explain if that particular topic is delayed, then it should say the reason why it's delayed, and then after that would be probably a pro forma that we would look at for extending the date.
Yeah, that's fine. And in order to try and start addressing that, the Chief Executive and I have agreed that we will meet regularly to discuss things, and so that we can, both from the officer side of things and from the elected member side, we can each express our views as to how we can start prioritising these things and working together so we support each other. Officers have got the time to prepare the reports that we need, but equally we are making sure that we are working along with the officers' timetables so that we are not holding anything up while we have a discussion about whether or not they're doing the right or the wrong things. And the first meeting will, well, the first one meeting actually took place yesterday, but we will be meeting regularly thereafter. So hopefully that'll address those points. We will be able to get those parts of the boxes filled in. At this stage we can't until we've had a discussion, and also until we feed back to officers what we're planning to do, because some of the officers may say, well, there's no point in doing that until next March, because we are not, as Officer Corps, going to be addressing that issue. And as I said, I think a lot of it will be informed by the government decisions on the local growth plan, for example. If that, the Mayor she wants hers done by, I think it's the end of October. I think she promised that she would get it done by. But we, as Felix will tell you, we are waiting to find out from central government what their priorities are, to make sure that we're all in lockstep together. Felix is well on with the one we've got here, but it is bigger than just what the Mayor's priorities are. So we've got to get all of those timescales sorted out. But yeah, you're all correct on that one, and I can assure you I'm on with it. So we're happy to approve that. Yeah, sorry, yeah, a minute.
Given the government's reform agenda in terms of housing and the National Planning Framework consultation that's going on at the moment, which has proposals for the reintroduction of strategic planning, I wondered whether the building homes suggested topic could perhaps be a little bit widened to have a look at those two issues as part of it. Because obviously there's one thing delivering the existing, but there's going to be an even bigger challenge delivering the much wider government's ambitions, but also understanding how, what advantages that there are to the combined authority if we do get those strategic planning opportunities.
Yes, it would be good to include them. The reason it wasn't is that I am aware that some local authorities will not necessarily be totally happy if the government were to give some of these responsibilities down to WICA. So I don't want to get involved in the internal machinations of some councils who would welcome it, other councils who would say, look, we're in charge, we're the ones who get the blame when things go wrong. So that's, but yes, the essence is correct. If these planning powers come to WICA, then we need to get hold of them quickly to make sure that the strategic direction, because if the Mayor is going to be delivering affordable houses, we need to make sure that the Mayor, the money that she's spending, is in lockstep with what the local authorities are spending, and that the business cases are being made. There was one last week that I was involved with from a planning side of things, where money's been provided by the combined authority. So we need to make sure that that's all in lockstep as well, because certainly in Leeds, we are going for our Leeds 2040 plan. We are doing our whole of our strategic look at planning again at the moment, and it's important that whatever the Mayor does, we can comply with. Examples would be if mass transit's going in a particular direction, should housing and employment be built alongside that to make it easier to access. So we need to think about the integration of all of these particular things. But yes, there is no doubt that if we do get those powers, then scrutiny needs to get a hold of the issues very quickly, because there is going to be big implications, particularly in relation, and in your case, how we're going to work with neighbouring authorities in terms of, for example, in Calderdale, the relationship with Manchester, in Wakefield, and to a certain extent Kirklees, what Sheffield are up to, in Wetherby, what North Yorkshire are up to, or Kippax for that matter, is what North Yorkshire are up to. So we need to work together, and we need to look how we're going to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm looking to try and maybe allocate a person to become the liaison for this scrutiny board with those other authorities, so that we can find out, so that we can work together and try and move things forward. Anybody got any other questions? Yes.
Yeah. It was more just in relation to the climate action. It kind of feels, from my side of things, a tiny bit like it's a separate thing kind of happening in the corner, whereas a lot of these other elements on it, climate does need to be built in. So it's just kind of maybe broadening that out slightly to make sure that climate is being, say for example with transport policy and strategy, making sure that
Yes.
because carbon emissions, transport is obviously to be a contributor to that, making sure that that is really driving some of that. So I know it's mentioned, but it's just kind of the cross-cutting nature of it is kind of a bit missing.
But point taken, yeah, point taken on that one, yeah. Okay, happy to move on? So if we can now move on to the item which is on performance outcomes. But hopefully you've all had a chance to read through these papers. What we're looking for from you is that there's going to be a new performance framework being developed. What suggestions have you got for this framework development? And also looking back, is there anything at a strategic level, not rather than, you know, the trains are late, at a strategic level that you feel officers can answer? So before doing that, for the sake of the new members, if I could invite the three guests, well, not really guests, they're officers of the, to introduce themselves in case anybody doesn't know who they are. So can we start with Ben?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Ben Steele. I'm Chief Exec of the Combined Authority.
Hi everyone, I'm Alan Rees. I'm Chief Operating Officer at the Combined Authority.
Hello everybody, I'm Felix Kumyampo from Director for Inclusive Economy, Skills and Culture at the Combined Authority.
Okay, so anybody want to, you've got the papers in front of you, there's no point in going through them all because it'll take all day to go through all the papers. So anybody want to raise any questions or queries on any of the information, any thoughts about how we can improve it, or have you any strategic concerns about the performance of any particular department or section? Yes, Councillor Felstead.
Yeah, I've got a couple, and it's regarding the actual graphical data. Throughout the report, with the exception of a couple of things, you've actually organised them from highest to lowest, and I don't think that makes for a very good read for us. You know, if you've got a blue, amber, or blue, and it's in the wrong order, it kind of throws you off. You have to go back and check something else before you can interpret what's in the chart. And then at section 3.25, there's a stack bar chart, and it's my least favourite chart. I think, for the sake of ease of reading again, I think that could do with being a pie chart, because you can discern the information much more quickly from a pie chart. That's really, I'm having to look at percentages that are absolutely minuscule. But other than that, in terms of the presentation, nothing else to add.
I'm able to deal, yeah, certainly, as we develop the performance framework, and part of the purpose of bringing in the performance framework and changing the way that we are doing this is to improve the way that we are reporting about the impact that the organisation is having in terms of improving outcomes for the people of West Yorkshire. So in terms of the presentation of some of the graphs like that, absolutely. If it's not telling you something in an effective way, then we're completely up for changing it. And I can see why that one, that one needs some improvement. The overall story from it, of course, is that against our business plan, delivery is in a good place, because the majority of what's on that graph of 3.25 is showing that things are either blue or blue amber. That's the overall message that graph is telling you. And then there are a number of amber red issues which need focusing on and present a level of risk against delivery. The point about the ordering of in the table, I think, do you mean where there's an appendix where we kind of pull out all of the things that are blue, then all the things that are amber, all the things that are amber red, etc. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah,
then, yes, I can. So I can now see the one you mean on page 66. Yeah, it goes blue, amber, red. Right, so it goes down in kind of how many outcomes are in each colour rather than going down from blue to red. And it would be better if it went from blue to red. I'm with you. Yeah. Yeah, I can answer that. So it's static because what it means is that our assessment at quarter 1, 2, and 3 of where we would be at the end of the year was the same. So it's blue, amber, I think. Or was it amber red? Unfortunately, I'm looking at this in black and white. But my point is that which was an error on. Thank you, boss. Right. So a slight error. So okay. So right. Let me explain a little bit about the ratings, and this does appear in the report. So there's a difference between quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 together as a block, and quarter 4 as a block, and that is that we changed the way the ratings are done. Okay. So for quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3 of last year, we had a 3-scale rating of red, amber, and blue, and we moved away from that because when you have red, amber, and blue, people go to amber, and it doesn't tell you what you need to know. By forcing a 4-category rating, you take the middle one out, stops people sitting on the fence, and they have to say it's either amber red or it's amber green. So in quarter 4, everything changed, almost everything changed, because there was a new assessment. The point about about it being static, this isn't directly measuring are we achieving progress in building a sustainable, nature-rich and carbon-neutral region. What it's assessing is, are we on track to deliver the objectives that we've set ourselves by the end of the year? So the assessment at the time was, there are some risks, but broadly speaking, we think we're on track to deliver our objectives by the end of the year. So we will have been making progress towards that, but that's why it's amber. And the reason that it's static is because we're saying that in quarter 2, the assessment was the same as it was in quarter 1.
Well, I think, Chair, that's the best plot of fresh air I've heard for a long time. I really do. And sorry, I'm not being personal in this. If that's the case...
The best one?
If that's the case,
yeah.
Why then have this report not gone on with another page that's actually given us the information of what changed in terms of this looking static from quarter 1, 2 to 3? Because your quarter performance is equally important in your annual report. And when I look back on some of these and the performance that you're expecting for the forthcoming year, it doesn't give you much hope of great movement. And I think that measurement there is not informative at all. It shows a really strong static placement. And my question is, if you go from quarter 1 to quarter 2 and you're still showing static, and I can go down the report and do the same, and in fact in some of them you've got arrows going down, right? So if that's the case, and this is supposed to give information about these these objectives here, why are we not seeing another page over here that shows us where the movement has happened in these particular static situations? What we've got on the next page under 321 are the colours again, and in that doesn't give us the reasons why for 1 and 2 they stayed static, 3 maybe you've taken some action to move them on, which has moved them into quarter 4. So why isn't that explanation carrying on to give us that idea that these have been accepted as static within particular categories?
Yeah, very happy to answer the question. So it's because the rest of this report is about the year end. So it doesn't repeat all of the reporting that has happened during the year at each quarter. So the rest of the report talks about overall across 23-24, what are the things that we delivered. It talks about the end position, and then it goes into talk about what progress we've made in the first quarter. So that's why it doesn't go into detail about what changed within each quarter. It talks about the end position, and then also what it does in one of the in the appendix is it does go through each of the objectives, in particular with a focus on those that are red and amber red, and explains why they weren't delivered.
Okay, Chair, then could I just ask, respectively, and I'm going to come back to the the information level in here as well. And bearing in mind, we've all got these documents pretty late. I don't know about anybody else. The post delivery in Wakefield is an absolute disgrace at the moment. I had to ask Katie to send me another one. £3.38 and the document didn't arrive. So in terms of the information in it, yes, I agree there's information in it. But what I don't see in the report is the reasons why that stayed static for so long. I mean, surely the committee ought to know the reasons why things were static and what improvements were put to it to move it on.
Mr. Still?
I think it's a point well made, and I think it would be more helpful. I think Alan recognises this in the if where we've got information being presented, that we explain the rationale and the reasons why, and in particular when it's a summary report, what action we've taken to shift that dial over the course of the year. So I think point well made. We'll pick this up in future reporting for sure.
I'll go Councillor Barnes, then Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually, this report is both too much information and not enough information.
Yes.
In a lot of instances, you're just being thrown information at you, and there's an awful lot. And I think the consistency point is well made across this. And I think actually later on in some of the other agenda items we're going to look at, there's an element of a lack of consistency in the way in which it's produced. It's a very good document for those who are using it every day. And I just wonder whether it's been tested. And this is actually true. I'm digressing slightly. Computer manuals are written by people who know computers. They're written by people who build computers. They're not written by people who have never used a computer or hardly use a computer. And therefore it looks very, very complicated and on that basis. And I think that's the inherent problem with this report. It's written by the users, not for individuals like ourselves looking into it and trying to analyse and find things. And I think that's the thing that I'm taking from this. It's a wonderfully detailed document, but actually I just wonder whether it's too detailed and focusing on the wrong items. Thank you.
Mr. Still?
I think that's a completely fair point. What we're trying to do in this report, and I think as you've seen from my previous comments, we've got a long way to go, is condense down into a smaller summary document as we possibly can the actions across dozens, if not hundreds, of different indicators to try and give an overall sense of performance against business plan. I think we will continue to try and refine it. The feedback that you're giving this morning is immensely helpful in helping us do that. I think what internally, because not all of us internally see these documents and live and breathe them and have many of the same comments internally, we want to shift definitely towards the point that Councillor Rhodes has made around almost less data but more insight and more analysis, and the rationale for where performance has been strong and where less so, but also a stronger focus on outcomes and the chain of actions towards those outcomes rather than in intermediate process steps. So hopefully that will help going forwards.
Councillor Carter?
Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry, but I am getting elderly, and trying to read all these documents on an iPad and not receive them well last Thursday is impossible. And I'm sorry, I think this report is as clear as mud. Whilst I completely agree with what Councillor Barnes has said, if you're working with it on a day-to-day basis in each individual section, then obviously you're going to understand it. But for me, I just find it completely meaningless in some respects, because each page says a different thing to the other page, and I'm not really quite sure where I'm supposed to be. You talk about making a happier West Yorkshire, and we talk about sustainability for business. Well, I can assure you there weren't a single stall in Halifax town centre yesterday happy, and I don't think there were a single business, because this flipping works that's going on in the centre of Halifax are absolutely appalling. There's a sign that says sustaining Calderdale going forward. You won't have anything to sustain because there'll be nothing left, and nobody will come in and nobody will want to know about it. And things like this are not mentioned anywhere. You know, these are things that are affecting people on a daily basis. And the roads are atrocious trying to get from A to B. HGVs can't get into businesses, they can't get out. But this is not mentioned anywhere in here. It's saying everything's hunky-dory.
We're looking at what WICA are responsible for.
Well, they are responsible for some of this, Chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but not everything. Okay, Mr. Still.
So I think in terms of comments on the papers, understood, and we've Alan and I have reflected on the changes that we're looking to make there. I think though what we're trying to do here is assess the performance of the organisation and the outcomes that it has set itself. I think many of the comments that you've made there are absolutely the kind of things that are being picked up through the local transport plan consultation and the work on that, because that is about the detail of transport planning, and that is a partnership document rather than a combined authority performance document.
What I'm doing as well is I'm due to meet with Katie Wilby to discuss, because what I would like to do is in future is to give you all access to performance information so that you can use that in your analysis and to look at things that are of interest to you and within the portfolios that you've got. So the idea is I'm going to sit down with her and we're going to talk about what's the best way of getting that information to members without it needing to be brought to a formal meeting. So that this should be an ongoing assessment. This set of information is taken to a number of other of the committees as well. So if we end up with 6 different derivations of the same bits of information, it's a heck of a lot of work for some officers to do. And without criticising too much, there's not that many officers actually in this session, so they might find it a bit difficult. But the point's made that that's why I brought it today, because I want to know from you what format you want this information in, so that I can get it to you regularly, so that you can see what's happening. So, Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at this and wondering sort of about the context behind it. I mean, obviously that we've come today and presented them for ourselves, and our colleagues have made comments about how they're used. I'm just thinking, because this is something that I kind of feel that in a previous life I've had involvement with collecting data and presenting it and management information reports, and I've done quite a bit of this. I'm wondering from your organisation's point of view, where you put these together and what kind of use your managers and project leaders might make of it, and how it informs the way that they sort of reflect on what they've done and what they need to do next. Could you give us a bit of background on that, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. So everything starts from the missions that are within the West Yorkshire Plan, which sets out the objectives that we're trying to achieve and the improvements that we want to make for people who live and work in West Yorkshire. And everything that we do is driving towards those aims. We then, on an annual basis, as an organisation, we develop a business plan, and the business plan explains what objectives we're trying to achieve over the course of the year in helping to deliver those missions. And everybody in the organisation, their roles are about delivering their part of the business plan. So when this paper talks about this year's business planning having 350 outcomes in it, what that means is that in this year's organisational business plan, there are 350 different lines. Now, some of them are with different scales, and that's one of the things that we need to work on. But essentially what we're reporting against it here is how on track are we to deliver the things that we said we would at the beginning of the year. And the way it's used internally, and we are making some changes to this and continually trying to improve the way that we do things. Internally, it is used as a tool so that we, as a leadership team, can identify where are the areas of the organisation where there's good progress towards the delivery of the business plan, and where there are there areas of risk. And where there are areas of risk, managing that risk. Why is it? There may be performance issues, there may be resourcing issues, there may be partnership issues, there may be government issues, etc. And that's how we use it.
Thank you. So it's obviously it's important to leadership, senior managers, and that. Is this something that's going to make sort of be in the consciousness of people throughout the organisation? I wonder, as people in the front line, are they going to be thinking about key performance indicators? I'm just wondering about the bluntness of it, that as like 4 categories, and I mean, I'm sure we all know the story of single word assessments in Ofsted and that kind of thing. But we can you can end up with something that's not really giving a full story. I'm just kind of sort of thinking about what kind of impact it would have on individual teams and how they do their job, and how they feel about their performance if their sort of activities are assessed in this way. I mean, I appreciate that the majority of these are performance indicators are not the responsibility of a single team or individual.
Okay, so they are initially a self-assessment, right? So individual teams and the leaders of those teams, the heads of service, assess where their teams are against the business plan, and they are then challenged on that assessment by their peers and their director. Okay, and then they agree. Right, these are the things. This is the rating that we think we want to apply to this particular objective, and there is always narrative that goes alongside that. And then if there is then all of that information gets collated, and then if there's something that the leadership team wants to drill down into, then it can do. So that's but the other point I would just make is that everybody in the organisation has a set of personal objectives, and their personal objectives are geared towards the delivery of the business plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Just to say that you talked about the local transport plan. You've got it in here, a new transport plan and supplementary strategies on page 109 is on blue and amber. Is there nothing in this document at all that tells us where we are with the existing transport plan? Do we have any documentation to tell us where the existing transport plan is and sits and what the outcomes of it are? Good question. Because it doesn't look like.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It doesn't look like it's in here.
Not in this document. But the current consultation document on the local transport plan has got an assessment of the performance against the previous business plan.
Chair, can I come back?
Yeah.
So how can we do one going forward if we don't know what the issues are of the current one? That I mean, the thing that springs to mind is the Salter Rebel project has been going on now since before COVID and still isn't finished. You know, I know it's a partnership with a local authority, and I know it's money that's given to the local authority, but it doesn't seem to me to be really good use of public funded money when it's taken so long to do, and surely the cost now at the end is going to be far more than it was expected to be at the start. And I would have thought that somewhere in among all this documentation there was something to tell me whether that is on scheme or not, with all the transport plans throughout West Yorkshire that are currently in that document. So can we get a copy of that then, if it's not in this document?
Mr. Still will hopefully give us an answer.
Yeah, so performance on transport capital programmes is presented, correct if I get this wrong, Alan, but it's presented to the Finance and Resources Committee, and that information can be provided, of course it can. And we are looking, going forwards, to being, to trying to give more clarity to individual schemes and less to overall performance, to meet the kind of comment which I think is completely fair.
So, Chair, under those sort of circumstances, is it possible for us to have a look at that to see where that sits and how the budgets have been done, so that we can have a look at that from a perspective of scrutiny?
I think one of the things I think it might be somebody, I don't know whether it be up to Khaled or whether it be up to another officer, to regularly send through to members the links to the papers when they're going to be discussed at finance, for example, and then you can access them. You can decide whether or not you want to see them or you don't want to see them. Now, yeah,
Sorry. Rather than flood our inboxes with information that is quite easily accessible for most members, because if you have an interest in a committee, you just need to go onto modern
onto the
onto
website,
the website and find it. I think if individual members can't access it in that way, then perhaps they could just speak to Karen. But I don't feel that we all need to be told all the links. That seems to be duplicating work that's already been done.
right, Councillor Rhodes.
Yes, I've been listening and going ahead in the paper, and I've put squiggly lines and question marks and leaves turned over. On page 63, it says, where outcomes were not fully achieved in 23-24, these have been reviewed as appropriate to ensure that these can be actioned for delivery in 24-25. Targets which have not been achieved as outlined below, each of these have been known issues throughout the course of the reporting year. Well, okay. They weren't achieved in 23-24. That's information that's very useful to us all. And then it says they're going to be reviewed so they can be actioned again in 24-25. What it doesn't tell us are what those outcomes were. There must be somewhere in the report. What are they applicable to in terms of the whole business case? And is the achievement on target? That's my first one. These are the actions in terms of business plans and comments made. When I turn over, Chair, and move on through the report, if I may, I am really, because of my role in health elsewhere, looking always to see what is built into the wellbeing and health agenda in everybody's annual report. And I've gone ahead in this one, and I think on page 88 here, and I'll bring in Felix on this one as well, if I may. Felix, I've wrote down that your skills and culture, major part of well-being of a person's life, indeed. So, on that point, I'm looking forward here, and I've gone into the issue to do with 2 decades in terms of working age population, which then goes on to the next page. That's 88 is the working population, and 89 is the prevalence of child poverty as a key measure of progress towards an inclusive economy. On page 88, it says, over the last 2 decades, West Yorkshire's working age population has steadily become better and qualified, but there's a continuing attainment gap with the national average. Question: how are WICA looking to support authorities or through WICA to deal with that gap? And if I look over page again, Chair, if you'll let me, the prevalence of child poverty is a key issue of progress towards an inclusive economy. I think the report is excellent in pointing out all the measures and issues that affect economy and our population, and it has to be commended on that. But what I have to say is this. First question is to Felix. That follows on in terms of child poverty. And then it goes on to housing, and they're all interconnected, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
It says on page 91, the average ratings of personal well-being improved in West Yorkshire during the year ending March to 22. Well, that was good. We're now in 24. Has that been attained, or have we had an increase in it? And then we go on in terms of those paragraphs, which are excellent in their description of, life expectancies. 2/3 of adults in West Yorkshire physically inactive in terms of activities, walking, cycling, we all know that. And then 9 out of 10 West Yorkshire authorities engaged in 22-23, with more than 2/3 visiting a heritage site. And providing local people with access to nature, and it's vital for health and well-being. That's a really good paragraph, and they're statements that we can all pick up in our own authority or in information from the government to their agenda. I'm going to pull all those together, if I may, because we have had delivered to us here before in terms of targets. Alan in particular told us there was a delay in term in refurb of houses. It was quoted, I believe, that you were hoping to do 7,000, but that didn't happen. In terms of the issue of the proportion of children aged under 18 in absolute low-income families, We have relative measures here again that date from 21 to 22. And the amazing thing is this, we have no further information, because it then says, but they remain higher than the respective UK averages in both cases. Now, when we make a statement like that, it means that we are relatively informed about the state of the nation within WICA and local authorities, because I know they all work together. But with that information there, why have we had no further detail? Because that was in an annual plan for 21-22. So that means nothing has changed there relative to Felix and indeed WICA as a whole. So in tying all these together, I then go back to a comment that we had here when we had two lady representatives from the carers through education, you may recall. Khaled, you were certainly here. And I always remember a comment that was made in terms of careers programme, getting into schools and into colleges, how difficult, and this was the expression they used, how difficult it was to engage in sixth form, etc., to try and engage with promoting skills and further enhancement in their ability through life. Right, Felix, your skills and culture. Skills are actually a major part of the education programme of children who do not want to go on to college. Are you involved at that stage with those kind of skills, or is this all down to educational attainment? Because we have a lot of young people out there who are wanting to get apprenticeships, etc.
Okay.
Is that part of yours, or am I talking about a
We'll
different
give Felix
skill?
a chance to respond to what's been said. Felix.
Thank you very much. There are a number of questions there. I'm not sure I got all of them very well, but you please come back if I have misinterpreted anything. So on the skills side, I suppose the first point to make is the combined authority's responsibility when it comes to adult skills is from 19 years onwards. So we have responsibility for post-19 and nothing below. Obviously, we have some influence. We are involved with schools. We have people that go into schools to support with careers and other such areas. But our formal devolved responsibility for skills from post-19. The information, the data you've gone through there are absolutely spot on. What we've provided is where the official data runs up till this point. So it's not as if there is information for the years after that and we are withholding it. That information is not available yet. The annual population survey, which is, I think, I was trying to go through other pages as we were flicking through, and I think that is the main source for a lot of what you were quoting there. When it comes to skills data, we don't get the information sort of month by month. It's at the end of the year, and there's about a year and a half lag to get to the point where we actually get the information. So what we've got here is the latest information available. I accept, of course, it's not today's information or, a few months ago, but it's the latest information we have from the Office for National Statistics. So that where we've gone, if we've gone beyond that to make a statement about what we feel the situation is right now, is likely to be a subjective position based on information we're picking up from our training providers and colleges that we work with. But it's not official data, because the latest official data is what we've provided. There was a point made about well-being and life expectancy. And again, I'm afraid the explanation there is the same. We rely on information from the Office for National Statistics. They publish, especially with well-being data. It started off as experimental data that was published through the ONS for a while, which they are continuing to improve. But it's not localized in a way that we are able to provide information at a very granular level. It's still fairly high level, and there's quite a lag. It's based on surveys. The best information for this is the census, but that is every 10 years. So by the time we get the analysis from it, it's already out of date. We have a lot of interaction with our schools and colleges here. We have responsibility, as I said, for the adult skills budget. It's about £67 million a year, plus other funding that we get from different funding pots from central government, which we deploy to enable people access the skills that they need. There is a particular piece of work going on the back of the local growth plan, which I'll talk about later on, which is looking at how we can simplify and clarify the technical and vocational routes for learners, accepting that, as we all know, the traditional academic routes are often much easier for people to navigate. People understand you do a GCSE, you go on to A-level, you go on to university if that is what you want to do. But if you want to do a technical or vocational qualification, the system tends to be unnecessarily complicated for both learners and for employers and for parents. And we're working to clarify that as best we can, and we hope to be able to present something to you soon. So for the example that you used, hopefully in situations like that, we'll be able to respond to that.
Terrible for this mic. Do forgive me. Thank you. The implication in the information given in this report actually gives the impression that West Yorkshire WICA has steady flow of information rather than being based, you've told me it's all based on the national census and how that equates national information and how it equates with the national average. Now, this is a point, I think, in reports that does need some more detailed information about. You may be awaiting reports, or you may be awaiting a survey on different parts of the information. For instance, over the last 2 decades, West Yorkshire's working age people has steadily become better qualified. But my question is this: there is a continuing attainment gap with national average. So this is saying there is a gap within West Yorkshire that needs to have some work done at it from WICA and possibly through local authorities' support as well. But it doesn't say any more than that of what you're doing or what you can't be doing or what you want to wish to do. And it's very negative, as well as there being some great points in it. Very, very negative. Plus, you mentioned that WICA don't have any responsibility for anybody until they're 19 years of age. That is total news to me after being sitting here for nearly 8 years. That WICA as an organisation, even when you determine in terms of educational attainment here, that a percentage of people aged 16 to 64 are the ones who are looking at the grade 4, level 4 qualifications, which seems to be the norm now. So what are you doing between the 16 and 19 then within West Yorkshire, where we know we've got a gap? Not just paper talk, but what's actually happening? I'm always interested to see outcomes, and I don't see many outcomes in any of these at all, in terms of this wasn't the gap is there. What we've done or what we're trying to do for the 16 to 64 years of age.
I'll just wade in, because what Felix is saying is absolutely true, because I work with the ONS and know lots of the statisticians.
I'm not doubting that, Bob.
So there is this lag, and there are some experimental data series, and there's all sorts of things that go on, and I know I've looked at poverty across the entire Bradford district at street level, and I've done it with the House of Commons, and I could do it for every district. It just takes forever to do it. So that's the first thing, and I totally agree with where you're going. It's just that there is this lag in information, because some of the stuff they're working on, they're actually changing a lot of systems, and I'm sure Felix will tell you this, and the way they report data in it. They put out experimental data sets and then they expect feedback from people, so it's what it is, really.
Well, I'm very aware of it, having spent 30 years in local government, of the issue about data. What I'm saying here is there are areas that have been identified quite rightly. The age group here, 16 to 64, you said you've no responsibility other than those over 19. I know about the gap in terms of information coming through from statistics, But what are we learning locally? What are we doing locally? You said there's no problem getting into schools through the education
Can you
department. What are we doing
and
locally?
explain what the position is? Thank you.
I'll do my best. You raise very, very fair points, as borne out by the data. If you look at the trends over the last 20 to 30 years, our gap with the national average in terms of attainment is broadly improving, but we still have a gap. We have a higher than average percentage of our workforce with no or very low qualifications, and a lower than average share of our population with what we call higher level populations, qualifications level 4, as you said. What are we doing about? So when I said, our responsibility for adult skills is for 19 years. For adult skills, our devolved responsibility is post-19. For adult skills, is post-19, not below. It does not mean that what happens before somebody hits 19 is none of our business. We just don't have devolved responsibility for that. We work with schools, we work with partners, we put skills training programs on, we work with local authorities, have specific statutory responsibility for needs, for example, and we work with them on that. But when it comes to adult skills, our responsibilities start from 19. Now, what are we doing? This is the third year running that we've had responsibility for the adult education budget, what is currently now called the Adult Skills Fund. And with that, we fund our 7 further education colleges and our training providers to put skills, training, employment support opportunities out there for residents. And each year, and I don't have the numbers right now, but we could definitely get you the numbers, there are several thousands of our residents that go through this program to get the skills they need. And we have a fund that we put aside for what we call the responsiveness pot, where if the evidence suggests that we have to particularly respond in a particular way because there's acute need here, we can deploy the resources to do that. So for example, we're deploying a lot of resources right now towards English language because we find that so many people in our workforce do not have the language skills to be able to interact and get on, even start a career, let alone get on with that. Yep. So we're able to respond. We responded when the bus company said they have no bus drivers and so all the buses are late because there's nobody to move it. We deploy funding to get people into that occupation and they get the training they need. So we have a responsiveness pot that allows us to scale people up depending on what the evidence says. But there's also the standard bit of funding that we put out for our further education colleges and our training providers, whether it's digital skills or numeracy or others. So we're doing a lot of this. But the fact is, we do not have the funding to deal with all of this at the scale that we need to year on year. And this is a wider budget, a wider conversation that we have every time with central government around this. The funding we've got vis-a-vis the scale of the challenge, the population we've got and the need, there's always a gap. So, it's the proverbial, having a blanket over you during winter. You pull it this way and your feet get cold, and you pull it the other way and your fingers get cold. And we do our best to respond as best we can, working with all the partners. But there's only so much, the results we've got will only go so far, which is why we are now working very closely with employers to lever in private employer funding as much as possible, where they can see it's in their interest for resource to be deployed in a certain way, because it means they have the labor market skilled in the way they need it, and they can respond and be successful. So we need to tap into all the resources we can, whether it's public or private. We're doing increasingly more. There's always more that we can do. But that is what's happening, and we're more than happy to have either a private briefing or to give further information in other reports that might be useful.
Still, do you want to come in, and then I'll have 2 more questions, and then we'll bring this session to a conclusion. So, Mr. Still, then 2 further questions.
Thank you. Very, very briefly, just to add to Felix's comments, I think on the what we call the state of the region report and the data sources, we will address that. So we'll make it clear in the reports, the data sources that we're using and their limitations. I think that's a completely fair comment. I think the next point is that Councillor Rhodes has been making is around the same issue that we talked about in relation to our corporate plan of how far the presentation of data is then followed by insight and, in this case, action. Now, we can't do all of that in one document and keep it concise, so we just need to be clearer where we're talking about information, where we're talking about insight for information, and then where we're talking about what we do about it in terms of how that impacts on our programmes. So we'll endeavour to make that clearer. The only thing I'd say in terms of the other challenge is that we need to be clear when we're talking about the system. What is the public sector and other partners doing to improve educational outcomes in West Yorkshire compared to what any individual part of that system, in our case, in our corporate performance reports, what part are we playing in that? And sometimes we dance between those things. We need to be really clear when we're talking about a system level, which is what we should all care about, versus what any individual partner is achieving in that space. We are trying to push that system approach through something called the Local Growth Plan, which I know you know about, and that is an opportunity to really look at the whole system and then kind of pull together a partnership approach. And you'll be involved in that over the course of its development over the coming months.
So I've got 2 questions to go with, one from Councillor Edwards, the other one from Councillor Barnes, and then we'll bring it to a conclusion.
Thanks, Chair. It was more, so page 107, the table, Appendix 1, which is also Appendix 2 at the top of the page as well, but it's Appendix 1 on here. Is that a comprehensive list of kind of like the objectives?
Yeah, so that list are key objectives that we are that we're looking to achieve during 24 and 25 against the West Yorkshire Plan missions. It doesn't cover absolutely everything that the organisation is doing, but they are our higher priority things.
Yeah, just for the purpose of the report then, so if I want some further detail on any of these, so say for example the 4th one down, ENS2, adult supported to upscale, I can search that in the report and it has about 3 or 4 other references to it, so you can kind of drill down, which is great. That's rated as blue. But say then if I pick the first amber red one, so if I search MT4, there's not a single reference to MT4 in the rest of that report. Now, obviously, because that's amber red, it would be useful for us as office, for us as the council scrutinising it, just to kind of get a flavour what the risks are with that, because obviously that's why it's rated amber red. Because there are references to other sections. So if you scroll down, there's another section where it kind of breaks down a couple of examples of risks. But then when I search that reference against the table, there's no reference. It just presents this is a risk about this objective, but I have no idea what that objective is because it's not mentioned anywhere else in the report. It just says here's a random risk. So it would be useful when presenting this information effectively. Only things in the report, only things mentioned in that, if you like, the key objectives are being referred to, or we refer to everything, or give all the objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take that away and look at it for next time. Just to assist, and what you've pointed out is very helpful. The appendix that you're talking about that starts at page 107, which has got all of the principal objectives in. There's then another table in the main body of the report on page 68, which unpacks some of those, but not all of them. And I think that's what you're referring to there. So the references to, for instance, the ENS one which you pulled out, that's expanded within that table that's in the main body of the report, but not all of them are. And we will absolutely address this in the future going forward.
If I'm being really cynical, every single one on that table rated as amber and red. There's not a single reference to it on the report, but there's a lot of references to the blues. So that's just me being a tiny bit cynical, but I appreciate, although I would appreciate some of them may not be key objectives, but then again, upgrading train stations, delivering train stations and park at ride schemes does actually seem quite important.
There are some positive comments, but there are also some concerns being raised by members in terms of the quality of the information and the layout of the information. Khaled has taken a note of them and will certainly follow up with them. And as I've said before, it is my intention to give somebody the responsibility for following through on these ones. So somebody's got a nice little gift coming down the line to be the scrutiny member who's going to lead on these things. So thank you very much for that. We move on to item 9 now, the local growth plan. Felix, you've already given us a good conversation, but can you now explain to us where we are with the local growth plan, where it originated back from the earlier WICA meetings and the iterations that you're now working through, and where you hope to be if the government give you clear guidance?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll do that. And I've got a couple of slides that I'll run through quickly just to give an overview. But just to say, as the Chair has just set out, we are in the middle of a process to deliver our local growth plan. The local growth plan is an imperative for us for a couple of reasons. One, well, maybe 3 reasons. We are overdue, we were always overdue an economic strategy, a refresh of our economic strategy. Secondly, the Mayor made a commitment during her re-election campaign to deliver a new local growth plan within 6 months of re-election. And the new Labour government also had in its manifesto and has had as a commitment since, as part of its growth mission for all local areas, combined authority areas, and others to develop local growth plans, which will then lead to the delivery of, or the development of, a national industrial strategy. So all these things form the context for where we are and form the context for where we are and the work we're doing. During the next month, we will make a submission to government of what our West Yorkshire's contribution to the National Industrial Strategy will be. That will be the local growth plan that we submit to government, which will articulate a set of priorities, up to 5 priorities, that we want to engage in with government and which will form a key part of any resource allocation that follows to enable us to deliver that growth plan. We will continue the work to then deliver and publish a full growth plan which will pick up all the other activities and actions that the Combined Authority and all our partners will want to embark on to make sure we grow our economy. So you've got a paper and a set of slides which summarize where we are, and I'll very quickly just give you a flavor of the story as we've got it. Those who were at the Combined Authority meeting yesterday, these are the same slides that I used, so you might want to tune out for a little bit if you want, but I'll just go through these really quickly. So West Yorkshire, as we know it, and I have clicked for the slide to change, but it's taken a while. There's a bit of lag in the system. West Yorkshire, as we know it, and you know it much better than most, I'm sure, an area with 2.5 million people and about 100,000 businesses, 1.2 million people in employment, with a very proud heritage and reputation when it comes to our industrial past and prowess. And our topography, our geography dictated what happened where, I'm sure, over the, in the last few decades, up to in the centuries that have come up till this point. And so it is no coincidence, given the rivers and the type of water we've got, that the wool industry grew here, and on the back of that, the services industry grew very well in Leeds, and Leeds is now the second largest financial center outside of in England, outside of London. And as a result of all of this, we have significant strengths that we should always be very proud of. We are an area with over almost 300,000 people working in the financial and professional services, over 100,000 people, 112,000 people at last count, working in manufacturing. We are the home of the NHS, the UK's health policy, and a lot of the health tech and med tech companies congregate here because of the expertise that we have. And out of these, we also have significant opportunities that are opening up in emerging tech, largely in fintech. We have great institutions that are based here. The Bank of England has been here since the 1820s. The Financial Conduct Authority is here. The UK Infrastructure Bank is based here. And because of these, financial technology, legal technology, even new technology in conveyancing, all setting up here because of the expertise and the heritage that we have. In manufacturing, as you know, we are really well known in wood and furniture products, in making components for automotive industry, for aerospace and others, in specialty chemicals, in textiles. We're really well known all over the world for all of this. I don't know what's happened to we are on. So our strengths are very well known, but as some of the conversation we've had before shows, and for whatever reason the slides are not moving on, but as the conversation we've had is shown, we also have significant challenges to overcome. We don't have our workforce skilled to the level that we would like them to be, so there's still that lag in the system. Even though we have 100,000 businesses in West Yorkshire, that is about 20,000 fewer than it should be for a population of our size. If you look at the business density in West Yorkshire, the number of businesses we have per head of population, again, we are about 18,000 businesses short of where we should be. And this falls variously across the different places in West Yorkshire. So really, there is a job for everybody in Leeds. The Leeds economy is doing well enough for every Leeds resident to have a job in Leeds, if only everybody who worked here also lived here. So a job density in Leeds is just about 1-to-1. But in Bradford, it's about 0.7-to-1. And in the other areas, it falls somewhere in between that. So we have significant challenges spread across the area that we need to address. We're talking about skills earlier on, and we have a particular challenge where, I think we need about 50,000 more people trained up to what we call level 4 and above. So we've got all these challenges. We have about 680,000 homes in West Yorkshire, and all of these need to be retrofitted. We have significant challenges when it comes to public transport. One of the members was talking about transport challenges in Corderdale earlier on. We know that connectivity is a particular barrier to growth. So the work we've done crystallizes the key barriers to growth that we have around a lack of investment over a period of time in infrastructure and business over time, the skills and the labor market profile that we've got, and connectivity. Those are the three broad barriers to growth and challenges as the evidence is laid out. In response to these, the diagram on the screen sets out 5 broad priority areas that the local growth plan is then looking to focus on. So I'll take this in turn, but very, very quickly. On the top left, unlocking growth through targeting our key sectors. We are looking at how we work to make sure our businesses and our entrepreneurs, our innovators with great ideas, are much more closely linked to our universities and other centers of knowledge, so that these ideas can be tested and rapidly developed and commercialized, so businesses can improve, can grow, can scale up here and be more successful and create jobs, good jobs that will support people and lead to greater prosperity. We're looking at how we can ensure that businesses coming in can land more softly and can get to grips with our area and settle very quickly. And what do we have to do then for that to happen? Part of the work we're doing is to completely have a root and branch review of how we engage with businesses, making better use of what we call the ecosystem out there, the partners in the system who are already well engaged with businesses. How can we work with them to ensure businesses have the support they need more readily and more effectively in a way that makes sense to them? The evidence is very clear that when a woman sets up a business, they attract about 1 or 2 pennies in a pound when it comes to investment that goes to businesses. And there's really no logical reason why that should be the case. Female founders are underinvested in. Likewise, founders who are from the Black and ethnic minority community are underinvested in. This means we are underinvesting in a huge chunk of our population, and that sets our economy back. So again, the evidence is very clear on this, and we, through the local growth plan, working through what our response should be. In skills and making sure people have the skills that they need to be able to succeed. We've talked a bit about this. The mayor made a commitment that all young people and everybody looking for employment will have the opportunity to acquire the soft skills that they need, that employers say really matters to go alongside, the hardcore qualifications that they might get in a setting. We're looking at early years. So I know we talked about, our formal devolved responsibility starting at 19 and over. But that doesn't mean that is the limit that should be the limit of our influence or our ambitions. We know that early years really matters. It matters in terms of the workforce. It matters in terms of young people having the best start in life, which sets them up to then be prosperous later on. It matters because of economic participation for parents and guardians and others. So again, we're looking at that. We look at technical pathways, as I mentioned earlier on, and many other areas. So I won't go into too much detail on skills, but hopefully that gives you a flavor. On transport, you know the work that's going on when it comes to mass transit and building a tram network, about bus franchising, about investment in our train stations, our railway stations, and other transport infrastructure. And finally, when it comes to places, we have significant opportunities when it comes to our key employment sites, our housing sites, to alleviate the housing need, but also as a key way of growing our economy and making our places more attractive, and linked to such attraction, making sure we are not degrading our environment, but instead regenerating our environment, even as we densify our economic activity and grow West Yorkshire. All of these coming together along the key corridors where economic activity takes place in West Yorkshire. So I was talking earlier on about how our places took shape in the centuries before. The evidence is really clear that working alongside, between Leeds, Bradford, and then sweeping towards Manchester, Leeds, Dewsbury, back and forth, arrow going both ways towards Huddersfield and Manchester, and economic activity heading in the other direction. And then heading south between Leeds and Wakefield, further south towards South Yorkshire, and making sure that economic activity along these key corridors are enabled when it comes to the infrastructure needed. People are able to access opportunity that they need, and our activities, especially also going north. very soon all four sort of quadrants of of Yorkshire will be headed by mayors, with a decision yesterday from Hull and the Humber. The four mayors working together, and particularly with North Yorkshire, where we have really strong flows of labour between York and Leeds, for example, higher level skills, but also complementarity with the nature of the economy there means we should not lose sight of what happens in North Yorkshire and our relationship there. Working along these corridors ensures that we can place the activities that I mentioned earlier on in some of these key areas and land them in these places in a way that makes sense to the people that live there. So in conclusion, we have a good understanding from the data of what our strengths are, and we should celebrate this. We should not lose sight of what our challenges are, and we should then craft our priorities to build on those strengths, but to respond to the barriers and the challenges that we've got. And we should make sure then that these things land well and land properly in the key places where people already congregate or tend to congregate, and that these places have the infrastructure they need for economic activity to flourish. And this will then form the basis of the investment decisions that we make, which I'm sure will be interesting to this committee. So hopefully that is helpful to give you a sense of what we're grappling with and what we are developing when it comes to the local growth plan. Thank you. I might be cheeky and throw it back to you. So what role do you want to play? So we are really willing and ready to engage with you in ways that suit you, because we know that the meeting cycle means sometimes these things fall in between the cycle. So we have sessions underway and some being planned, engaging with a wide group of people, and we would love for you to be part of that.
Sorry, I've tried to take a few notes on that. One of my main concerns from listening to that presentation as a Bradford councillor was there was one place mentioned more than any other in that report. That was a very Leeds-centric economic model, as far as I heard it. Yeah. That was how can the other authority areas and our residents support this core city. That seems like the business strategy. So if we're thinking what the implications are for some of the other goals for WICA, so for example, climate. One of the aspects of climate that is kind of underplayed is trying to reduce emissions, say, from transport, is actually trying to reduce travel. So by that, we actually should be supporting a more devolved, localised economy. So supporting, so for example, when we talk about the financial services industry, Halifax, for example, the Halifax head office site is in Halifax town centre. The Yorkshire Building Society's head office site is in Bradford. This Ecology Building Society in Silsden. The Yorkshire and Humber, West Yorkshire is is a banking hub, not Leeds, if you like. And I think we need to try and find a way how we can basically acknowledge the other local authorities aren't there to kind of feed Leeds. Because that does have other implications for our local authorities in terms of, like, say, for example, council tax business rates, where we get our income from if all the business is moving into one of the authorities. And then the map you showed with the corridor, it's illustrated again with the diagram you showed with the corridors. So these are really important corridors, effectively funneling people to Leeds. Whereas there was nothing really for me how we're going to encourage, say, business, the economic benefits of, say, for example, Huddersfield and Bradford. Well, that's a journey I used to do, and the commute, it's quicker for me to travel, or was quicker for me to travel from Huddersfield into Leeds than into Bradford than it was just to get the direct train from Bradford, because that train is so awful. Bradford to Wakefield, it's just like I wouldn't even consider that journey because it's just so complicated for me. So that is my principal concern from what you've just presented, and I'm sure some of the other members from other authorities, but I mean it does have implications for Leeds as well, like Wetherby, for example. Wetherby is always right out in the corner, and it's kind of, there was no really reference to how we're going to support the Wetherby economy without people coming into Leeds.
Thank you very much. It's a really fair challenge and one that I completely understand. Just to alleviate some of the concern, though, the map had an arrow both directions. The idea is not to funnel people to Leeds in the way that you put across, if I may say. It's not at all, but it is acknowledging, though, that, for example, you mentioned financial services, and you gave a really fantastic example about the Halifax and Bradford. Absolutely spot on. The fact, though, is that 290,000 people are employed in financial and professional services, and about 80% of them are in Leeds. So we completely acknowledge that in some sectors, the bulk of that economic activity happens in certain places. Just like in manufacturing, a lot of our manufacturing is in Halifax, Huddersfield, other parts of West Yorkshire. It depends on the sector. I mentioned wood and furniture products, that is in another part of West Yorkshire. Our RF and satellite cluster, that is in Bradford. This is not about saying Leeds is preeminent over everybody and everybody should funnel to Leeds. Not at all. It is acknowledging that the corridor between Leeds and Bradford is really crucial. There are 1.3 million people that live in those two cities. It's more than half of the population of West Yorkshire. It's crucial, we believe, according to the evidence, that we improve connectivity between those two places so people can move in and out quickly and easily. It's currently only 20 minutes on the train, but people need choice and options if you live in between the centers of those two places. And to improve, to densify and to make the economy a lot more complex when it comes to tradable services. So it's not about just funneling people into Leeds. That would be the wrong thing to do, which is why, as I said, the arrows are going both ways in the corridors. But it is acknowledging that the Leeds economy is the strongest economy we've got. And how do we make sure that there is access? Because Leeds Station is the busiest station outside London. It's the busiest train station outside London. And I think Ben is the transport expert here. Will say, it's supposed to be responsible for, is it a third of the delays in the north of England and when it comes to the train network. So we need to acknowledge that, but we also need to be aware of the fact that there are economic strengths across West Yorkshire. How do we grow that? How do we make sure people have access to the opportunity? The challenge is, traveling from Bradford to Wakefield, as you say, absolutely spot on. And this is not. So a big part of what we're talking about is the Bradford station, the new station in Bradford, the Southern Gateway in Bradford, the City Village in Bradford, investment we're discussing in Keighley, the RF and space cluster in that valley. These are fundamental to what we are talking about here. And if that did not come across in what I was saying, then it's my bad, and I take that on board. But it's, hopefully that's helpful.
Just to finish, I agree everything what you said. That was missing from the report, and that worries me that if you're presenting this economic plan, when the economic's been presented, that still becomes the focal point, and that can't be the case. There's a diagram. The arrows was two ways. Nothing in that report suggested the arrows are two ways. It suggested the arrow was one way. That's what the report says. It's regardless of what they're saying in response. So it's a graphical representation, but the content of the report doesn't reflect that. It reflects a one-way arrow.
Thanks, Chair. I have to concur with everything that Councillor Edwards has said. you said as well also that there was a ratio of 1-to-1 for employment in the Leeds area, and in the other boroughs it was a lot less than that. So a young person living where I live might struggle to get a job in Calderdale, and might need to have to come to Leeds for that job. So just out of curiosity, I thought you might like to know that the absolute fastest time you could get from Ripondin bus stop to Leeds, that's without any traffic jams, is 2 hours 32 minutes. And it takes 40 minutes in the car without any jams. There is no connectivity. Living where I live, in a rural area of West Yorkshire, Tobberden would be even worse than me, but there is no connectivity with Leeds. This report is so Leeds-centric. I think you need to be looking at, as Councillor Edwards has said, other parts of this borough. It'd be even worse from Owen Firth. I'd like to think how long it'd take from Owen Firth. You know, you can't write a report to suit the combined authority and tick a box that says how wonderful we're doing, when in actual fact it's only about Leeds and nowhere else. And I think if you start putting every other borough together within this report, you'd end up with, ooh, we're not doing very well. So I'm sorry, I think it should be a better report on the state of West Yorkshire with regards to transport infrastructure and connectivity.
I think Felix is heard.
No, this is his report.
You know. But so anyway, Councillor Rontree, if you want to come in now.
It's 3.3 in the report that I'm looking at.
Anyway, let's not. Let's keep it civil. Let's keep it civil. Everybody's entitled to their view of what we're doing. So, Councillor Rontree.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm a Leeds member. I do have some sympathy with the drift of what Councillor Edwards and Councillor Carter were saying there, because it struck. One phrase that leapt out at me was reference to unlock growth, and I was thinking to myself, in view of sort of what we've had before, that there's a little key challenge here is to unlock growth in the other parts of West Yorkshire. There's sort of more scope for doing something. There is, I suppose, the danger of the sort of Leeds overheating, given what we've been saying. What I wanted to ask was, when we say unlock growth through a targeted approach to key sectors and specialisms, do you have any specific examples there? What we're actually doing, what we actually intend to do? Are we thinking about particular sort of supporting particular types of FE courses, or facilitating businesses, input into the planning process? What specifically is it that you've got in mind there? And I do have a second one actually, which is just there was the phrase there, increasing economic complexity, and I wonder what you meant by increasing economic complexity and why that's a good thing.
Bring in Mr. Still first of all, and Felix can then come in afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a general point that that what Felix has got here is a really tough job, in that he's trying to present a report that is true to the challenges that West Yorkshire faces, which are in a region of our size, multifaceted and complex and often deep-seated, while being true to the expectations of a growth plan that celebrates West Yorkshire, talks about the opportunities here, talks about the basis on which growth can most likely happen. And so I think what I would ask of the committee is, we do need to focus on both, but bear with us if we don't get that exactly right or to your liking first time round. But it is a tricky balance to find.
Right, Felix. Over to you. Do you want to try and address one or two of the points that Councillor Rontree has made? Together, just work. Okay, we'll go to the next one then. Right, so we've got Councillor Merrick next.
Thank you. I wanted to ask some sort of wider questions in terms of your priorities. Obviously, the priorities that you're indicating here are the same priorities of your existing strategies. But my understanding of the government's growth initiative is actually it's about wider ambition, broader approaches, the opportunities of strategic planning and other things to think bigger and make a step change in what's going on. And I suppose obviously recognise your prime focus on developing existing businesses, but in order for existing businesses to succeed, and ditto in order to deliver much more housing, some of the other things, there are secondary support mechanisms which are going to be vital where we know there are existing big blockages. You know, I think, you think of the electricity distribution system, you think of Yorkshire Water's poor performance in terms of facilitating connections for new housing developments, whole set of issues. I do wonder, whilst, obviously understand that transport is, the combined authority's biggest function, whether actually having a transport as opposed to a general infrastructure priority is the right choice for the new situation as opposed to what's been done in the past. So I just flag that one to you. I think that's actually what the government wants. And whilst we obviously don't control a lot of those other infrastructure areas, nonetheless, if we're to succeed in a step change in growth, we will have to address those. And I think the plan that you submit needs to pick that up.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Haig.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a general point and then something specific on skills. People don't live their lives by local authority boundaries, and I think we all sometimes forget that. I think the fact that some people come to Leeds to work or leave Leeds to work or go to Bradford or even leave West Yorkshire or come into West Yorkshire is not something we're ever going to have any kind of control over. And I'm a recent immigrant to Leeds. I've lived in the south of England for most of my working life. And things I didn't know, for example, is that Leeds is the third biggest city in this country. People don't know that. They don't know that Bradford is in the top 10. And I don't see that here. People say, isn't Manchester bigger? No, it flipping isn't bigger. It really isn't. And I think those are the kinds of things that in a planning where we're trying to attract people in, that we should be really talking about. We have a heft that's not just population, but is actually economic and all the other good things that are in this region. So I've got a slightly out of the area perspective to bring to that, I think. I'll move on to the skills thing now, which you talked about soft skills in your presentation, and perhaps work readiness, people, especially if they've been out of work for long periods, don't have skills and confidence even to write a job application or go to an interview. I've certainly done work with people in those situations myself in the past. And I see that the government is talking about reforming job centres to support that work readiness, also to reduce risk. So after long periods of employment, risk of losing benefits, being able to take on work, and then if it's not a good fit, there's no penalty. So where are we in terms of building that into our planning and working with job centres and other employment agencies to make sure that we're aligning with them, and also, they're going to be investing in it. If we're going to be investing in it, let's invest in things that work together well. That's all I've got to say.
I just finished working in Leeds, maybe one-to-one in Leeds, but Hare Hills, where I worked for the last 5 years, has got the same economic challenges that I'm now working with in Manningham. But you've referred here to something quite important as a new area that I want to follow on, which is when we're looking at good level of development and children birth to 3, that dictates in a quite remarkable way lifelong outcomes. And the early years and childcare sector has taken an absolute hammering in the last year. I've got a daughter who's an early years Montessori practitioner. So I would like to see how, because there's a lot of evidence that if we invest in that and really rebuild that, we can build capacity in communities and build ambition and hope. That's not something that has ever fallen within the remit of this footprint of governance, but if it is,
I welcome it. I accept there's a tussle with local government, but the join for me is obvious, right? And then the other bit on transport. Sorry, people in Tolberdon go to Manchester. People in Wetherby go to York because that's a logical and sensible thing to do. People in Fitzwilliam probably go to South Yorkshire. We are connected, so something about the connections with the other mayoral plans as well, because boundaries are boundaries. But I've really welcomed the putting health and well-being in that, because the distance in well-being and life expectancy, firstly life expectancy is going down at the moment. Height of children is going down, obesity is going up, and the distance between Manningham, where I work, and Menston is 13 years in lifestyle. So I actually quite like your framework. I want the young people I'm working with in Manningham to get jobs in Leeds. I want businesses to happen in Bradford as well, but if they're going to get a business and finance qualification, I don't want them just staying in Bradford. I want them to get on a train to Skipton, or I want them to get on goods transport. But early years, please, because I think if we're beginning to put a long-term agenda, and I'll be dead by the time this is fully achieved, probably, but this is where we ought to be investing, because we've been doing short-term damage limitation for years. Early years, please.
Finally, Councillor Barr.
And I'd like to thank Councillor Berry for that happy note at the end of his speech there. Mine's a very quick one, page 197, the last bullet point. Surely we should be aiming higher than a level 3, and actually that should be level 4. I would prefer to be sitting here in a few years' time with you saying we've achieved 95% on level 4 than 100% on level 3, if that makes sense. I think aim high, you miss it. I would be happy with that, and I would be happy to be minuted on that for future reference if I ever came back. Thank you.
If Felix, you can sum up what we've had here, and then we'll leave the final word.
Chairman, I did indicate you.
Sorry, do you want to come in then?
I'll be very brief. On the draft that I've looked, and in particular this one, it looks like the hub and spoke model that we've been speaking about for years in terms of reaching out across a corporate level, which I agree with. But I have to say, I totally endorse the comments that have been made here, because if Leeds wasn't on this agenda today for debate, I don't think we would have had one. And there are authorities out there, Wakefield, you mentioned Fitzwilliam, reaching out and joining in terms of the needs outside of Leeds is equally as important as the development to draw people in. And we have southeast of the district in Wakefield, where the skills attainment and everything else that goes along with it have either got to consider going to Barnsley, or if they wanted to come into Wakefield, it's the connectivity of the ability to get to them. For to get to Leeds now from Wakefield, which is one of the oldest cities around in this West Yorkshire area, for to get there, anybody around now have to try and afford, let's get it straight, afford the ability to get either the pass or the train fare to get to where you can get a train, because the buses do not go after night if anybody has a long day in their training period.
No, they don't. No, that's right.
We have a situation where we have one bus every quarter of an hour down a main road into Wakefield from the conurbation to the other side, which is Oxford, Horbury, Netherton, all going out of that side. One bus. We used to have a bus, was 117. That was taken off, and that serviced everybody from that side of the district to get to Leeds, if they so wished.
I have one of the 10 minutes.
But we have got to, and I support this, the emphasis has got to be, yes, we have Leeds as a situation now, which is maybe the major employment, but add to that the people that work in our hospitals. They are the second major employer. And for people to get connectivity to appointments outside of where they live for the appointment time that's given to them, with the reduced connectivity that we have around our districts, is virtually impossible. Impossible. So let's go with the big picture. Let's go with the big picture. And let's look out there, because not everybody has the qualifications that we're going to go into the financial industry. We don't have a manufacturing base like we used to do. We don't, No, we don't. Not generally across West Yorkshire. I'm sorry. Let's get real in areas. Don't be thinking about Leeds all the time. We don't have the manufacturing base that we used to do. We have pockets of it. We have pockets of it, but people have to get to it. And when we haven't got the connectivity that we want for people to use the facilities of employment in Leeds, let's look outward and see what can we do with connectivity around the district to promote people being able to live, work and enjoy their local district. Because at the moment I know people that are working, going to Leeds, and they have to go into Wakefield to get a train to get to Leeds. Now there's cost of living, there's the increased fares. We're on about the £2 rail fare, bus fare going to go up, which is a big bone of contention on people who lived within a lesser rate, going to have to pay more now. So I really do support what's happening in innovation, in skills, in hopefully attainment for people that want to increase their skills capacity. But to do that, you have to connect people with a rail and a bus system that they can actually get to it. And I feel very strongly about that, Chair.
If you can, Felix, sum up within 3 minutes so that we can leave you across 1 minute. Otherwise, you might upset your boss by not giving
Let's give
you
Lee the rest. It's a lot of comfort.
All right, I will.
You might.
Switch your mics off.
Betty. I will give it a very good go. The last point on connectivity, everybody agrees. That's why it's on here. We know connectivity is a challenge. We know it's one of our main barriers. And if we do not improve that, we will not grow the economy. So we take the point completely, and it's a central part of what we are talking about. There's a question about unlocking growth and our key sectors and some specifics there. I tried to set out some of them as I was speaking. These are the slides you've got, our attempt to present to you in a simple and clear way very quickly in a meeting like this. The general story of what we're trying to do. There's a lot of detail that sits behind this. I mentioned some of our key sectors earlier around finance and manufacturing and health and other areas. And the evidence very clearly coming through around advanced manufacturing, some of the key specialisms where they are, and the businesses there, which I mentioned, in emerging technology. So we're really strong in finance, as I said, but the growth is in emerging technology, the technology-enabled applications that is taking finance and legal services and others into other areas. So those are the kind of sectors and specialisms that we're talking about, and the businesses there, and the businesses that we're looking to bring in. But happy to share a lot more detail if that's helpful, but I know we're struggling for time. And it's in doing that and growing those clusters, that is what we mean by increasing complexity. So a lot of the time, the services that we have don't tend to be tradable services outside of our area. The chain breaks after 1 or 2 links. Making it more complex is introducing more services where businesses trade with other businesses, and add value along the chain, which grows more prosperity and challenges businesses to be more innovative and so to be more productive. And areas that are more prosperous have more complex economies because of the chain links between the businesses and the activities that take place there. So there was another point about what our priorities are, being broader, wider, thinking bigger. And I think you make a really good point, Councillor Merritt, around electricity and power generation, water, and other infrastructure. So we take that away and consider it more. We see where we are. You can see from the slides you've got and what I've presented today how quickly this is moving on. So we take that point on board. Having said that, it is acknowledged, well, there are many who also believe that the transport connectivity challenge is so strong and so important that deserves to stand on its own. And we then look at other infrastructure we need in some of our places. So we'll keep wrestling with this, and we'll see the best way to represent that. But we take the point. It's a very fair point. Councillor Haig made a point about acknowledging and celebrating what we've got, and then talked about work readiness and confidence, employment support. this is really critical to what we are talking about when I was talking about the West Yorkshire Promise and the work we're doing there on soft skills. It's all about helping people to be ready, to be work ready, but it's not just a supply side thing. It's bringing employers in, acknowledging what employers already do. There are many employers that are actually doing this and doing it very well. And we don't want to just steam in and say, we have the answers, we know what we're doing. It's actually acknowledging what people are doing and then bringing them around the table to say, what more can we do? How do we get this to a point where if there is a soft skills accreditation that we can give to job seekers, that then is recognized, so that let's say if ASDA's putting one up and somebody goes through that and they get an accreditation, they can turn up at Morrison's and it's recognized there. So how do we recognize that? And then are there levels to this or not? So there's a lot of work going into it, and hopefully you see more of this. And you talked about employment support. Couldn't agree more. We're doing a lot of work there. Yesterday at the Combined Authority, there was approval for us to the funding that we've got for Employment West Yorkshire, but to make sure we don't miss, and Councillor Berry made the point about health, we don't miss the health-led economic inactivity, which is growing and is particularly significant. So these are some of the key things. You mentioned the job centre and the changes there. Again, we're talking to government, and we'll make sure that the all-age career service that we're talking about here does not cut across the government's plans for a work and jobs and career service, which is the change that they want to bring in. Early years, I couldn't say, that's the work we're doing. We're working with Leeds Trinity, University, we're working with the Demonstrator Centre, we're working with the Directors of Children's Services. We're bringing all the key partners together, acknowledging that we don't have the formal powers, but we have the Mayor's Office and the Combined Authority has a convening role that we can play to bring these partners together to achieve the outcomes that are important to all of us. And very finally, the point about level 3. I am never one, and we will not be undersold when it comes to ambition. However, the ambition to make sure that everybody in West Yorkshire has a minimum level 3 is as transformational as it gets, given that the bulk of our population right now is level 2 and below. To lift everybody to a minimum level 3 is absolutely transformational. So, I take the point about level 4. Level 4 is degree level. But level 3 is where the technical skills live. And that route serves our population and our economy. And if that is the minimum, that would have transformed our labour market within a generation.
Can I just say that was a great debate. I know it got a bit heated at times, I accept that. But there's nothing wrong with that. And hopefully you can also see that in Felix we actually have someone who knows the area, because he was able to quote and give examples of what's happening, and someone who is fighting for what's happening, and he is doing everything he possibly can. And he will take note of what you've got. I think there's definitely a role for scrutiny when we get the next iterations of this plan to come back to us. Now, whether that comes back to a formal meeting or whether it comes back to a working group or a workshop, fine, we'll make a decision at the time. Because we've got, as we heard earlier on, there are other things that we've got to try and get through. But thank you all for your attendance today. Thank you all for coming along, and if it was later at night I'd say, well, maybe the best thing now is to go down the pub and we can all share a drink together, but it's only lunchtime, so we've still got half a day to go, so thank you all for your time. Bye bye.